What is up, everyone? Renfail here, and welcome back to another Starfield video. Today is my official first impressions, and I'm going to be talking the bad with the good, because as much as I love this game, I do recognize it has flaws, but I would also like to point out that all the games I review on my channel have flaws, and I point them out. Baldur's Gate 3 in particular, we've been loving, been having a lot of fun with. We spent 3 years in early access. I just did my first sort of should you buy the game? And I let people know that you might want to buy it now, but you also might want to wait for patches because Act 3 is still currently a buggy hot mess. But despite that fact, I still love the game and I think that you should give it a shot, even with all of the bugs. I said the same thing about Cyberpunk 2077, and I'm saying the same thing about Starfield. It's a good game. It's a great game. It's a fun game, but it does have some stuff wrong with it. That's okay. Not every game needs to be the gourmet steak. I love beef in all of its formats. Sometimes I like McDonald's, sometimes I want gourmet. I can look at a game like Baldur's Gate 3 and say, that's a gourmet experience. And I can look at Starfield and say, maybe that's the McDonald's experience, but it doesn't take away from the fact that I frickin' love it. And I will always love it until I'm done. I love Bethesda games, what can I say? There are good things here, there are bad things. We're going to talk about all of them in today's first impressions video for Starfield. If you haven't already done so, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. I do daily streams at 11 a.m. and Central Time. We have a Discord channel, links are down below. We do a whole lot of other stuff here. We do other video games. We do the 2 podcasts from Middle Earth and Dune. I do TV shows and film reviews, book reviews, and beyond. A little bit of game dev stuff as well. So check all the things out. And hopefully we'll see you in the next live stream or Discord as well. But in the meantime, let's talk about some of the things that we can look at in terms of a first impressions video for Starfield. So first and foremost, let's talk about the fact that yes, there are bugs. They exist. I've seen some things on the Series X that make me chuckle. Nothing game breaking so far. I've seen some issues with animation sequences where we've been talking to like a character and someone will come in the field of view and just like suddenly walk across the frame and turn and look at us and like give us this bug-eyed stare, and it's like, well, all right, careful now. Also, during this morning's stream, actually, I'm recording this whatever day this is, Monday. During this morning's stream, we were having an issue where we got into this combat scenario. I ran down a corridor, clicked on a door, went into another like scene, loaded over into another scene, and my companion was still having issues in combat behind me. And as a result, the guy in front of me who I was supposed to speak to, the dialogue window would pop up, and I would have all of my options, but he was running around the room like crazy because he thought he was getting attacked, but I was still able to communicate with him. That's what we would commonly refer to as jank. There is definitely some jank in Starfield. But overall, performance has been very good on the Series X. I've seen really no issues at all. I have had a couple of times when the console has done a hard crash, where not the console, excuse me, but the game has done a hard crash, and I've just had to go out to the main menu, quit Starfield, and reload it, and we're right back in. So it hasn't been any issues. Like, I remember the PlayStation 4 with Anthem launch and with Cyberpunk 27, that caused my actual machine to blue screen crash and completely reboot. I've not had any of those issues with Starfield, so I can't say that I've seen anything really issues that would I would not consider this to be a bug-riddled game. I would say that it has the normal amount of jank that I've seen from pretty much every game company that's released a game in the last 20 years in the internet era. If you want companies to go back to having flawless releases, then it needs to be released on a single platform without these myriad, chipset issues and GPU issues and power issues and all this other stuff, these infinite combinations on PCs, and just deal with like a single console. And also, games of 30 years ago were not these complex, procedurally generating, beasts of games that are, 150 gigabytes or more to install on a machine with technology and graphics that are light years beyond what games were 30 years ago. So it's very unfair when people make those comparisons. So I look at Starfield and I say it has jank, it has some stuff, I've seen some things, but ultimately none of that detracts from the fact that I'm having fun playing this game and I am getting a very enjoyable experience from Starfield. The 30 FPS limitation that a lot of people have complained about because they're FPS gods and they have to have 500 FPS in every game they play. You do you. Having played this on both my 4K monitor, or excuse me, my 4K smart TV and my 1080 monitor that I play on, um, I've had zero issues with 30 frames per second. The only place I might have noticed any slowdown whatsoever is during first-person shooting when I'm going into these heavy combat scenarios. And there's no aim assist here, so it took me a while to get used to the first-person shooting in this game. Once I realized what it was all about, and I slowed it down, and I stopped trying to pretend like I was playing, Call of Duty, um, I'm able to get a much more enjoyable experience out of it. But I would say the 30 frames per second thing that they locked the Series X to, I don't have an issue with at all. It feels and runs great. It looks great. It's smooth as butter everywhere except for during heavy gunfights. And I mean heavy gunfights. If it's just a few people on screen, it's not that big of a deal. But I will notice it. I will notice some performance issues, some frame rate jitter. Not a big thing, but it's noticeable during heavy gunfights. But again, not a big deal. I'm not here for this as a shooter game. I'm primarily here as an RPG with huge story arcs and space exploration and everything else. And that's where I'll say that, as far as the space exploration goes and the space flight, they have nailed it. It feels very, very good. It's a lot of fun jumping around systems, getting into space combat. The space combat feels very fluid. The only thing I might critique would be that they could have perhaps gone a little farther with the way the ships control. One of the things I liked from Everspace 2 as an example is the fact that you can be in a completely stationary position and use your jets to strafe right, or go up or go down, independent of moving your ship up and down or needing your engines to be on. That felt really good on Everspace 2. I think it could have been done here, but who knows their limitations. I'm not taking away from what they've got here. It feels very good, and I'm having great, enjoyable fun. And I love being able to sit in my cockpit and watch the animation sequence and hit my jump drive and watch the animation sequence and bring up my scanner from inside the cockpit and scan the planet bodies and find places to land and land on planets and explore the planets and survey the planets. I love all of it. There's nothing I have against the space combat and the space exploration whatsoever in this game. It's exactly what I wanted it to be. I don't give a shit about landing on planets or landing on outposts, manually doing all that. I don't care about in-atmosphere flight. I hated No Man's Sky. I hate Elite Dangerous. I just don't like those games. I also don't like EVE Online that much. I did pre-order way back in the day Star Citizen on its Kickstarter for $40. I've played the alpha, the early access alpha, a few times, and it's good, but it's so far away from release that this is touchable, this is tangible, and it feels good. I will say that I think the space combat was a little bit better in Everspace 2, but they also aren't doing all of the other things that Bethesda's doing with this complex RPG, which gets us to the RPG element. I've seen people talk about how they think the writing is lesser quality here than insert other game here. The big one right now that everyone's talking about is Baldur's Gate 3. They'll look at the writing in Baldur's Gate 3 and the writing in Starfield and say, it's not the same. I want this level of quality here. Well, again, you're dealing with gourmet steak versus the McDonald's experience. Nothing wrong with that. Stop being a judgmental prick who says that people shouldn't be allowed to enjoy hamburgers, fast food hamburgers, and a gourmet steak at the same time. They don't have to be the same. Baldur's Gate 3 is a narrative experience, right? Very, very finely crafted, handcrafted, and it has a 200 to 300 hour storyline wrapped up in there if you want to go whole hog with all the variations, but it's still very limited to Act 1, 2, and 3. One city, that's it, and a handful of locations. By handful, I mean a few dozen. There's lots of places to go, lots of little zones, 300-ish encounters to go through. Excuse me. Starfield has an infinite number beyond that. And as a result, we see for certain I've seen lesser quality writing in some of the generic areas for side quests and stuff. But I would also argue that if you haven't done the faction quests yet in Starfield and you're complaining that you think the Starfield writing isn't that good or that the voice acting isn't that good, then you haven't worked on any of these huge epic faction missions, because the writing is very, very good. The voice acting is very, very good. It's a better quality than what you see with their side quests. And I think this is them choosing to say, if we're going to have to pick our battles, we're going to pick the faction battle and have the filler content, which we want to have there for all these various reasons. And again, it doesn't all have to be gourmet experience. Remember what this is at the end of the day, and as long as you can recognize that and work your brain around it, then you'll have a much better time enjoying Starfield, because at its core, it is a really great experience, but it is that fast food experience compared to, say, the gourmet steak that Larian has built with Baldur's Gate 3. That's the easiest way I can think of to explain it right now. I'm sure I'll come up with more analogies as we have more discussions about this. Um, there's a lot more dialogue and a lot more going on in Starfield than what's going on in Baldur's Gate 3. However, I would also say they don't have nearly as many permutations. But to those people who say that there aren't any permutations and that choice doesn't matter in Starfield, again, get deeper into the storylines. I've had multiple occasions now where I've had to reload because Barrett has become so upset with me for doing something that he leaves my party. And that's just one example of choices absolutely matter. Your companions will leave you if you do things that they disagree with. These are just little things about choices matter. Choices impact storyline. I've had multiple outcomes for individual quests based on the decisions that I made related to conversations and choices of action. Some people survived, some people didn't, so on and so forth. There's a lot going on here. Um, Too many loading screens, I've seen some people say. I don't have a problem with that. I get to see my concept art, not my character art, screenshots. Your screenshots show up as loading screens in this game, which is one of the reasons I look at it and say, what is there to complain about? I'm getting to see this really cool looking, beautiful looking game, and the poses and the screenshots that I've taken the time to take, and I get to see them represented in a collage of loading screens every time I load. That's freaking amazing. What is not to love about that? And to people who say that no other game does loading screens, this game shouldn't have loading screens, modern games don't have loading screens, you don't know what you're talking about. If you've never played God of War or maybe Jedi Survivor or something like that, I might forgive you a little bit. But pretty much every game out there utilizes some form of a loading screen. They just mask it behind animation sequences. So God of War, Jedi Survivor, anytime your character needs to go into this tight little narrow space where you're like shimmying down a crevice in the mountain and all you see around you is rock texture, that's a loading screen, everybody. Come on now. Don't be so naive. That's a loading screen. The difference is they've put an animation sequence on top of that loading screen so that the next scene can be loading while you have this sequence where you feel like you're in control, but the reality is it's just another form of a loading screen. Does it look better when it's done that way? Abso-frickin-lutely. But I would also say that not every company is going to want to put the same amount of effort and money into that particular part of the game. They might decide that having 1,000 planets is more important to us and having a really cool procedurally generating system in place to get us the things we want to see on the planets, the POIs, and everything else. We want that tech to be our priority. So rather than focus on a flashy animation sequence that makes people feel more immersed, why don't we focus our energy over here and instead we'll allow them to have custom screenshots for their loading screens? It's not that hard to think about, folks. I get it, but at the same time, just because one way is more visually appealing doesn't mean that it's necessarily the right thing for every project. There's nothing wrong with loading screens, especially when they are 2 to 4 seconds on the Xbox Series X. It's literal seconds, and people are like, "Oh, it's 10-minute loading screens. Oh my god." I mean, I get it. I get it, but it was also at the same time, I don't find this to be an issue whatsoever. Although I will readily admit that it looks better to have that animation sequence um, loading screen as opposed to just a loading screen. But I like my character screenshots, so we're good. I'm good with what they've given us here. Um, Beyond that, I haven't seen really anything about. Quick commercial break, everyone, to give a shout out to our first official guild officer, Bubalonia, as well as all of the guild champions, and of course, all of the members who help keep me on the air full time. To join as a member, simply click that join button below and pick your tier, but you can also support with Super Chats on any live stream or premiere, or Super Thanks on any upload or YouTube short. Don't forget the Discord. Let's get back to the video. About this game, other than I've seen a lot of people claiming that it's just the same Bethesda we've seen for the last 25 years, and they haven't done anything innovative, and there's no reason this game should be considered Game of the Year, and I think that people who say that are being very disingenuous with the work that went into engineering this game and what's been done on the back end to make all of these complex systems come together. Um, They definitely do have a different art style for like the character models, and I love how some people will compare it to like Final Fantasy 16, which is a much less, you know, complex game in terms of programming and engineering, and therefore it can spend. This is what so many people who aren't working in game dev don't understand. When you have an overall expenditure that you're allowed in terms of performance, and whatever you can fit within that umbrella and still get the frames that you want is considered golden. But everything draws against that final number, whatever that number might be, and that number is going to be different for every single project. Having multiple complex systems mean that your graphics are not necessarily going to be as highly polished as another games might be because you've put your engineering somewhere else. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it does take the understanding that that's what's going on. Because I've seen some people say Bethesda's just lazy because they don't have the same character models as insert game X, Y, or Z here. That's just not true. Do the character models look as good as, say, Baldur's Gate 3? I'm going to say not necessarily, but I've also seen some horribly janky stuff in Baldur's Gate 3. One of the reasons I stopped playing my Forest Gnome in Early Access and moved to a Wood Elf for my main Druid when Live came was because I couldn't stand the animation issues that were happening between short and tall races. And they have worked towards fixing that, but it's still kind of wonky and it still looks kind of funky. And even though the character models that they have in Baldur's Gate 3 look different than Starfield, I have seen moments in Starfield that look just as good as Baldur's Gate 3, but I will also readily admit that I have not seen that same performance or that same level of quality in every single encounter I've had in Starfield. But I also understand how you have your A grade characters, your B grade characters, C grade characters, D grade characters, and so on. And the visual fidelity of those depends on how close to your character are those characters going to be. And I think that in some cases, because of the jankiness we mentioned at the beginning of this, where characters can move in and out, you're sometimes seeing some issues with how that looks when juxtaposed together. Um, so again, there is some jank to Starfield, but I would also say that while they might not have chosen to go with super high definition, super hyper realistic character models, they have definitely gone super hyper realistic with the way the planets look, the way the starships look, the way the if you've ever wandered around like a pirate base and taken paid attention to like the assets that have been built for these locations, the set dressing, all of that has an insane amount of detail on it, and that's where they've chosen to spend their umbrella of points as opposed to on having the best character models that everyone's ever seen. So I think it is very disingenuous when people say that Bethesda didn't push new boundaries or do new things with this game. They've definitely done some crazy new stuff with this game. It's just a lot of it is behind the scenes tech as opposed to front facing graphics that people can go ooh ah and then mouth up, pat up the drool off the corner of the mouth with, So at the end of the day, especially after having discussed this game with my early thoughts video the other day, I would give this an 8.5, out of 8.5 or 9 out of 10 right now. It's highly enjoyable. I'm loving everything about it. There are the occasional things that I look at and go, it'd be cool if they did that differently, but I'm not going to take it away from them too much. Some of the lesser quality dialogue, sure, I'll knock it off a little bit for that. Some of the, but that's a subjective thing too. Like, you might not like my humor, I might not like your humor. You might think that the Crimson Fleet is the best storyline, I might think that UC is the best storyline. Like, it's all subjective, at the end of the day. So this is something to bear in mind. Um, but yeah, I'd say 8.5 out of 10. Couple of jankiness issues, couple of writing issues that I'm not a big fan of. The fact that it does bog down a little bit during like the heavy gunfights, and I wish there was some sort of an aim assist. All of those are things that take it away from being a 10 out of 10. But an 8.5 out of 10 is not a bad place to be for a game in terms of a first impressions video. I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning. I forgot to mention this. I am roughly 70 hours in to my first playthrough yet right now, and I anticipate this to be about 300 hours for my first playthrough. I'm not rushing through the new game. I've been doing activities and bounties and leveling up my stuff to get access to crafting, and you know, having 70 hours into something. I haven't even finished a main faction line yet. I'm in the middle of the Crimson Fleet one right now, and I've done a couple of starters here and there. But I've been having great fun with this game. I think it is worth it if you plan on maining this game, or if you're a content creator like myself and you want to make content around this game. You can get it with Game Pass if you want, which is a very inexpensive way of getting your hands on it. You can also buy it outright. I chose to buy it outright, even though I have Game Pass. I purchased the premium edition. I've talked about that in other places. I've got a review, which you may have already seen, about the art book that came with this, which is a really cool presentation, the way they did that. I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's providing me with all these different things that Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't provide me with, but just as much as Baldur's Gate 3 gives me that deep CRPG element and deep, rich, handcrafted storytelling element that I think fits fantasy a little bit better. That's a different game. This is a different game. Both are giving me equal levels of enjoyment. And I know that's a very hard pill for some of the anti-Bethesda people out there to hear, but it's just fact. It's a good game. It has flaws just as much as all games have flaws. But that's my opinion, of course, on its first impressions. If you liked my take on things, like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Daily streams at 11 a.m. Central. There's a Discord. Check it out. Lots of other things happen on the channel. Check out the member videos for those of you who are recent members, because we do those a few times a week. Live streams on the weekends are for members only, and we'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to super thanks if you liked the video.